We had been best friends since the age of 5. Everyone around us could see we were in love except for us. I first met Leo when his family moved into the house next door, and my mother insisted I take over some cookies as a friendly gesture. He was sitting on the front steps looking upset about leaving his old friends behind, so I told him he could share my friends if he wanted to. He replied that girls had cooties, and I dumped the whole plate of cookies right on his head. After that moment we became inseparable. For the following 13 years, we did virtually everything together. He walked me to school every single morning, even when the other boys teased him for spending time with a girl. I attended every one of his baseball games, including the away matches that required long 3-hour bus trips. We had this special routine, where I would paint his jersey number on my face and cheer louder than all the real girlfriends in the crowd. People constantly asked if we were dating, and we would both laugh as if it were the silliest idea imaginable. We weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. We were simply Leo and Julia, which felt both more significant and less defined at the same time. High school was when the pressure from others really intensified. His teammates kept insisting I was clearly in love with him, and my friends swore he looked at me differently than other girls. We would roll our eyes and repeat for the 100th time that growing up together made us more like siblings. I knew all his embarrassing habits, like how he would eat cheese straight from the block at 2 in the morning, and he had seen me through chicken pox, braces, and that terrible perm in sophomore year. You don't date someone who helped you bury your hamster back in 3rd grade. College nearly tore us apart, though. He got accepted to the State University for engineering, while I went to the art school about 40 minutes away to study graphic design. The first month was really tough. I would call him in tears because my roommate was difficult, and he would drive over at midnight with soup whenever I got sick. He would message me during his lectures because his lab partner kept flirting with him, and he didn't know how to politely turn her down. We made a promise to have dinner together every Sunday, no matter what else was happening. Sometimes that meant meeting in the middle at this rundown diner with awful food, but it was exactly 20 minutes from both of our schools. Those Sunday evenings kept me grounded. In junior year, things shifted when Leo began dating a girl named Becca from his engineering program. She was intelligent, attractive, and genuinely kind, which somehow made everything harder. For the first time in 16 years, Leo had someone else who took priority. He still showed up for our Sunday dinners, but now he spent half the time texting her. When I called him upset about failing a major project, he was at her place and could only talk briefly. I convinced myself this was healthy and normal, and that I was glad he had found someone. I started dating as well. There was this guy named Daniel from my painting class who was kind and humorous, but he was absolutely not Leo. The 4 of us went on these uncomfortable double dates, where everyone was trying extra hard to make things comfortable. Becca would ask how long Leo and I had known each other, and then say how adorable it was, as if our friendship was some kind of curious story. Daniel kept attempting to keep up with our inside jokes that he couldn't possibly understand. Leo and I could barely even glance at each other properly, because it felt like we were betraying the people we were dating. Everything came to a head in senior year when Becca got accepted into grad school in California, and wanted Leo to move there with her after graduation. She gave him this big talk about how it was time to move past childhood connections and begin their adult life together. The childhood connection she meant was me. Leo told me about it during one of our Sunday dinners, and I said he should definitely go because Becca was wonderful, and California offered excellent opportunities in engineering. He stared at me for what felt like forever, and then agreed that I was right. That night I returned to my dorm and cried until my roommate threatened to contact health services. Daniel ended things with me 2 weeks later, saying I was obviously in love with someone else, and he deserved more than being the backup option. I wanted to disagree, but I couldn't because deep down I knew he was correct, even though I had never acknowledged it before. The week before graduation, Leo appeared at my apartment at 3 a.m., which wasn't strange except that he was completely sober and looked completely wrecked. He said he had broken up with Becca because she had asked him to choose between moving to California with her or staying close to me, and he couldn't make that choice. I told him he was foolish for throwing away his future over a friendship, and he replied that was exactly the issue. I wasn't just a friend anymore and hadn't been for a long time. Then he kissed me. I pulled away from the kiss, and my entire body started trembling. Leo was looking at me with an expression that mixed fear and hope, and I couldn't catch my breath properly. We had just stepped over a boundary we could never step back from, and I knew it. My mind was searching for the right words, but all I managed to say was whether he had truly ended things with Becca for me. He nodded as if it was the clearest truth in the world, and I felt my stomach turn over. We sat there on my apartment steps without touching, simply gazing at each other, and I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. His hair was tousled, and he had this exhausted look around his eyes, like he hadn't slept for days. I wanted to kiss him again and also wanted to escape at the same time. Eventually we went inside and sat on opposite sides of my couch, because I was too nervous to be near him. We spent the entire night talking without any physical contact. Leo confessed he had been in love with me since sophomore year of high school, when I showed up to his baseball game with the flu just because I had promised I would be there. He said he had convinced himself it was only friendship, because I never seemed interested in him romantically. I sat there listening and feeling foolish, because I had spent years telling everyone we were practically siblings, when apparently we both understood differently. When it was my turn, I admitted that Daniel had been correct about me being in love with someone else. I told Leo I simply couldn't acknowledge it was him until he kissed me that night. We continued talking until the sun began rising through my window, and at some point we both drifted off to sleep on the couch with our feet nearly touching in the center. Raina returned home the next morning and discovered us like that, still fully dressed and asleep. She took one look and started demanding details about what had happened. I was still groggy when I told her that Leo and I had kissed, and she actually screamed so loudly that my neighbor pounded on the wall. She kept repeating that everyone had been expecting this since we were children, and she knew it would eventually happen. Her excitement made the situation feel concrete in a way that frightened me, because now others knew and there was no reversing it. Raina prepared coffee for us and sat there smiling while Leo and I avoided eye contact. She asked when our first date would be, and I realized we hadn't even discussed what this new situation meant. Leo left to go change his clothes, and Raina told me I looked both happy and terrified, which perfectly described how I felt. Leo messaged me later asking if I wanted to get coffee near campus as a real date. I agreed even though my hands were trembling as I typed the reply. We met at this coffee shop we had visited countless times before, but now everything felt strange and new. I kept slipping back into our old best friend habits, chatting about my design project and asking about his engineering lab, then remembering we were supposed to act romantic now. I knocked over my coffee twice because of my nerves, and the second time it spilled across the table. Leo quickly got up to grab napkins. As we walked back to campus, he reached for my hand, and I allowed him to hold it. His hand felt warm and familiar yet entirely new at the same time, like we were pretending in someone else's story. I kept remembering how I had held his hand countless times as kids, but this was different, and I didn't know how to navigate it with Leo. A week passed, and we were still trying to learn how to be in a relationship instead of just friends. Leo came over to study and suggested I should look for graphic design positions near his school after graduation. I felt something break inside and told him I wasn't Becca, and I wouldn't completely change my life just because he had decided we were together now. He looked hurt and said he only wanted us to be in the same place, but I understood what he truly meant. He expected me to be the one who relocated and made sacrifices. We had our first serious argument right there in my apartment, with textbooks scattered all around. Leo said I was being unreasonable, and I said he was being self-centered, and we both knew we were actually arguing because we were scared. He left without kissing me goodbye, and I sat there feeling ill. The following few weeks were difficult as graduation approached, and we faced real choices. I received a fantastic job offer from a top design company in the city 2 hours away, and I wanted it desperately. Leo received offers both near home and in my city, and when I told him about mine, he immediately said he would accept the local position. He mentioned something about staying close to his family, but I could tell from his expression that he was already beginning to regret the decision he had made with Becca. And now he was repeating it with me. We had this long and emotional discussion, where I explained that I needed him to pursue his own path instead of just following me. Leo became quiet and asked if I even wanted to be with him, and I said yes, but not in this way, not with him making sacrifices and then resenting me for it later. Leo's graduation celebration was at his parents' house, and everyone kept congratulating us on finally becoming a couple. His sister Azariah took me aside near the kitchen and asked if I was certain about this relationship. She said Leo had been basing his decisions on what he thought I wanted ever since we were young, and she worried he didn't know his own identity without me. Her comments stayed with me throughout the rest of the party. I watched Leo chatting with his relatives and realized I had been so caught up in my own worries that I hadn't noticed he might be losing parts of himself. When we were 5, he had thrown away his juice box because I said I didn't like that flavor. When we were 12, he quit the chess club because I found it boring. At 18, he had turned down California for me. Azariah was correct, and I didn't know how to resolve it. 2 months after graduation, Leo was working at a local engineering company, and I could tell he disliked it. I would visit on weekends, and he would seem exhausted and irritated, complaining about his supervisor and the uninteresting assignments. One night, I woke up to use the bathroom and saw him browsing California job opportunities on his laptop. I asked him straight out if he regretted declining Becca's plan, and he stayed silent for a long while. Then he admitted that sometimes he wondered what his life might have been like if he had chosen differently. We stayed awake the rest of that night, discussing what we truly desired, instead of what we thought we should want. Leo said he felt trapped, and I said I felt guilty, and we both agreed that things needed to change. We decided to attempt a long-distance arrangement, so Leo could accept a stronger engineering position 3 hours away. The first month was rough, because we were accustomed to constant communication, and now had to plan phone calls like acquaintances. Leo would call during his lunch, and I might be in the middle of a design meeting. I would text him at night, and he would already be sleeping because of his early mornings. I focused intensely on my work projects, and began forming friendships with colleagues at my firm. We would visit art galleries on weekends, and I would realize I was enjoying myself without Leo present. It felt like independence, and like losing something simultaneously. I was surprised to discover I actually enjoyed having room to understand who I was without Leo constantly nearby. 4 months into the long-distance phase, we were hardly communicating beyond brief work updates. I went on a coffee break with my coworker Caleb one afternoon, and we ended up strolling around the city for an hour, simply discussing design, music, and ordinary things. When I returned to my apartment, I realized I hadn't thought about Leo all day. That night when Leo finally called, our conversation felt strained and hollow. He mentioned some work project, and I shared about a client presentation, and we both sensed we were just filling the time. After we ended the call, I sat staring at my phone, wondering when talking to my best friend had started feeling like an obligation. I considered texting him that I missed him, but wasn't sure if it was genuine anymore. I signed up for a pottery class the next week because a colleague had recommended it, and I figured why not try. The studio had the scent of wet clay, and about 8 people sat at pottery wheels looking as inexperienced as I felt. The instructor was an older woman with gray hair and a loose bun who kept saying things like feel the Qley and don't force it, which seemed overly philosophical but actually worked. My first bowl turned out like a flattened mess, but I didn't mind because for 2 hours I wasn't worrying about Leo or our complicated relationship or anything except keeping my hands steady. I continued attending every Thursday evening, and by the third week I could create something that resembled a mug. The class members were friendly in a relaxed way, chatting while working but not getting too personal. There was a guy named Noah who worked in accounting, and a woman named Sarah who taught middle school, and we would laugh about our clumsy pottery pieces while cleaning up afterward. On Fridays, I began exploring the art market downtown with people from my design firm. We would wander through the vendor booths sipping expensive coffee, and I would purchase small paintings or handmade jewelry that I didn't really need. My apartment was gradually filling with items that had no connection to Leo, things I chose because they appealed to me, not because they evoked shared memories. My coworker Caleb invited me to his birthday party, and I attended even though I barely knew the other guests. I ended up discussing graphic novels with his roommate for nearly an hour, and when I got home I realized I had genuinely enjoyed myself without once checking my phone for messages from Leo. The strange thing was that it felt liberating, but also significant. Every time I laughed at a joke Leo hadn't heard or made plans he wasn't included in, there was this slight guilty sensation in my chest. Like I was supposed to reserve all my best experiences for him, even though that didn't make sense. I had constructed my entire world around being Leo and Julia since age 5, and now I was simply Julia, and I wasn't sure if that was personal growth or a loss, or perhaps both. 3 months into long distance, my phone rang at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, which was unusual because Leo and I had stopped calling without planning at first. I nearly didn't pick up, but something prompted me to answer. He was crying so intensely that I could hardly make out his words at first. He kept repeating that he felt trapped and invisible, like his life was paused and nothing he did had meaning. I sat on my bed holding the phone, trying to find the right response while he described how his job was okay, his apartment was okay, and everything was okay, but he felt like he was fading away. He confessed he had only accepted the engineering role because it allowed weekend visits with me, not because it aligned with his actual career goals. He said he had been making decisions based on staying close to me since childhood, and now he didn't even know what he wanted for himself anymore. I asked him what he would desire if I weren't part of the equation, and he remained silent for so long I worried the connection had dropped. Then he said he didn't know how to want things for himself, because depending on me had always seemed like the most important thing. I realized we had both been doing the same thing, choosing out of fear rather than true want. After we ended the call, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, reflecting on how loving someone shouldn't require pausing your entire life, but somehow that's what we had done. 6 months after graduation, we had the breakup discussion over video call. Leo's face on my laptop screen appeared weary and sorrowful, and I probably looked similar. We had been avoiding the topic for weeks, with calls becoming shorter and more uncomfortable until we felt like acquaintances who once knew each other's entire lives. He suggested maybe we had jumped into romance when we should have remained friends. I agreed even though hearing those words felt like something shattering inside my chest. We discussed how we had gone from best friends to partners without learning how to be both. How we had assumed our long history allowed us to skip important steps, but that's not how relationships work. Leo said he needed time to discover who he was without me, and I said I needed the same. We agreed on a genuine break with no contact for some time, not the pretend version where you still message daily while claiming to give space. When we disconnected, I closed my laptop and sat quietly for a moment just breathing. Then I began crying and couldn't stop. I cried until my face was puffy, my throat was sore, and my chest felt heavy. Losing Leo felt like losing part of my identity, like severing a limb I had possessed since I was 5 years old. I had spent more years with him than without him, and now I had to learn how to be a complete person on my own. At Thanksgiving, I drove home dreading the entire weekend. My mom had prepared her usual large feast and invited half the neighborhood as always. She casually mentioned, while I was helping with the dishes, that Leo was also visiting his family. My stomach sank, and I spent the rest of the evening extremely aware of every sound of cars outside. I kept glancing out the window at his parents' house, next door like I was 15 again, waiting for him to visit. Saturday, I hardly left my room because I was afraid I might bump into him while he was checking mail or taking out the garbage. Sunday morning, I woke up early and made myself coffee in the kitchen. I looked out the window and froze because Leo was sitting on his front steps. He was just sitting there wearing a hoodie and jeans, staring into space. When he glanced up and saw me through the window, our eyes locked, and I couldn't move. He appeared different somehow, more grounded and authentic than he had seemed on our video calls, like he had grown into himself during the months apart. I stood there holding my coffee mug trying to decide what to do, and then he gave a small wave. Before overthinking it, I grabbed my jacket and went outside. We ended up talking for 4 hours on his front steps, just like we did when we were younger. At first it was uncomfortable, both of us being overly polite and cautious with our words. Then he told me about his therapy sessions, and I forgot to feel nervous. He said his therapist had helped him understand he had been scared to pursue things for himself, because he believed depending on me made him weak. He had spent so many years being the one who supported me that he had forgotten how to allow himself to need anything. I told him about my pottery class and the art markets, and how frightened I had been that creating a life without him meant I no longer loved him. I admitted I had pushed him away because I was scared of becoming like Becca, of being the reason he abandoned his dreams. He said he understood that now, that we had both been so afraid of the wrong things that we had run from the right ones. We talked about our jobs and our friends, and everything we had experienced in the past 6 months. It felt like being best friends again, that natural and comfortable way we used to communicate before things became complicated. But it also felt changed because we weren't pretending anymore. We weren't forcing anything or hiding from anything. We were just Leo and Julia discovering who we had become. Leo took out his phone and showed me a job offer he had received in my city. It was from a strong engineering firm working on projects that genuinely interested him. He said he had interviewed for it a month earlier without mentioning it, because he needed to know he was choosing it for himself. He was accepting the position no matter what happened between us because it was what he wanted for his career, not because of me. Something changed inside my chest when he said that. For the first time since we were 5 years old, Leo had made a decision that was completely his own. He wasn't following me or staying nearby or giving anything up. He was creating his own path, and I simply happened to be in the same city. I asked him what this meant for us, and he said he wasn't sure, but perhaps we could work it out together. He said he wanted to try again, but in a new way this time, without all the fear and guilt and past weighing us down. I realized I wanted that too. I wanted to discover who we could be when we were both complete individuals choosing each other instead of relying on each other. We agreed to begin slowly when Leo moved to my city in January. We would date like regular people, instead of assuming our 16 years of shared history. Let us skip important steps. Our first real date was at this coffee shop near my apartment that I had visited many times but never with him. Leo arrived with flowers, which felt so formal and funny that we both laughed. We ordered our drinks and sat at a small table by the window, and it was awkward in the nicest possible way. We were attempting to be romantic, but kept slipping into best friend habits, then catching ourselves and trying again. He told me about his new job, and I shared about a design project I was enthusiastic about. When he walked me home, he kissed me goodnight at my door, and it felt entirely different from that initial urgent kiss in my apartment. This one was deliberate and gentle, and less fearful. Like we both understood what we were doing this time. The next 6 months required real effort. We had to learn how to be partners while remaining independent people, and it didn't happen easily. We argued about balancing time together versus time with our own friends. I had to fight the habit of falling back into our old pattern of doing everything together. Leo had to practice telling me when he needed space, instead of withdrawing for days. We had a major disagreement in April because I made plans with my pottery class friends on an evening Leo wanted to spend together. He said I was picking them over him. And I replied that was exactly the kind of mindset that had ended our first attempt. We didn't speak for 3 days, and I was afraid we would return to where we started. But then he called and apologized, saying his therapist had helped him recognize he was slipping into old fears. We worked through it and found a healthier way to manage scheduling issues. Gradually, we developed a balance where we could be close without losing our individual selves. We had date nights and friend nights and nights where we did separate activities. It felt healthier and more challenging and far better than before. When Leo's company offered him a promotion that would require moving to their California office, he didn't mention it for 2 weeks. I discovered it because he accidentally left the offer letter on my kitchen counter. I felt hurt initially that he had kept it private. But then I understood he was trying to decide independently as he should. We discussed it one evening over takeout on my couch. He said he had been debating it for weeks because the promotion was excellent, but he truly enjoyed the current project and the team he worked with here. I told him honestly that I would miss him if he left, but I wanted him to choose what was best for his career. I meant it this time. I wasn't saying it because I thought I should or because I feared becoming Becca. I meant it because I wanted Leo to have the career he desired, even if that meant not being in the same city. He looked at me for a long moment and then said he was declining it. Not because of me, but because he genuinely preferred his current work and colleagues. The California position would mean starting fresh, and he liked where he was. I believed him, and that felt incredibly important. 2 years after that first kiss, we were back at the same diner where we used to have our Sunday dinners during college. The food was still bad, but we kept returning because it belonged to us. Leo seemed nervous throughout the meal, dropping his fork twice and hardly eating his burger. I thought perhaps we were heading into another serious talk about our future. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. He said he had spent the last 2 years learning how to be his own person. And the best part was that becoming his own person made him want to be with me even more strongly. He took out a ring and asked me to marry him. I said yes because I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid that loving him meant losing myself, or that he would resent me later, or that we were making a mistake. We had both developed into individuals who could stand independently, which made choosing to stand together feel completely right. We had done the difficult work of separating and rebuilding ourselves on our own. Now we got to select each other not because we had to, but because we truly wanted to. Planning the wedding became this interesting reality check about who we had actually grown into. I sat with the venue coordinator discussing seating arrangements and realized I was assigning separate tables for Leo's friends and mine because we had developed real lives apart from each other. My pottery class friends who had never met Leo, his engineering colleagues who barely knew me. It struck me that we weren't those desperate young people anymore who couldn't manage without each other close by. We had our own interests and our own social circles and our own difficult days that the other person didn't have to solve. Leo would come home from work annoyed about a project, and I would listen but wouldn't try to fix it because that wasn't my responsibility anymore. I had a gallery rejection that hurt and Leo comforted me, but didn't take it as personally as if it affected him too. We were choosing each other every single day, instead of simply defaulting to each other because of our history. It was more challenging than I had imagined that night on my couch when he first kissed me. It was messier too, because we had to truly communicate instead of instinctively knowing what the other needed. but it was better than any idealized version I had been too scared to imagine back then. The wedding day arrived, and as Araya stood up to give her speech, looking exactly like Leo when she became emotional, she spoke about watching us grow up next door. How she had observed us spend 16 years mastering friendship, and then 2 years completely rebuilding everything we thought we understood about each other. She said she had never seen two people work harder for their relationship, or struggle more to learn how to be both independent and connected. When Leo and I danced later, his hands steady on my back, I thought about how we had nearly lost each other entirely. How we had to separate and learn to be complete individuals before we could truly be together in the right way. Every argument we had about space, and every night we spent apart discovering who we were alone had brought us to this moment, where I knew exactly who I was and still chose him. He looked at me and smiled, and I knew he was thinking the same thing. We had done it the difficult way, the complicated way, the way that nearly broke us, and I wouldn't change any part of it.